But because next Sunday is Easter Sunday, this is today traditionally called Palm Sunday. Why is it called Palm Sunday? Well, we'll find out in the second part of our study this morning, this afternoon. But what we'll do is we'll start with this. Let me show you. We're going to be covering the first 19 verses of John chapter 12. And I've got it broken up into two groups, triumphal worship and triumphal entry. Now, the triumphal entry is what we refer to as Palm Sunday. And again, we'll find out why that is. What I always like to do at this time of year when we have this opportunity is not only look at the triumphal entry, the reason for Palm Sunday, but I like to take it back a day. So we go back 2,000 years and a day. You know, we go back an extra day and we look at something called triumphal worship. And we'll find out why it's called triumphal worship here in the first half. Excuse me. We'll find out why that is. But let's go ahead and jump into verse 1 here, triumphal worship. It says, then 6 days before the Passover. Now, the Passover is when Jesus was going to be crucified. Okay, it's what we would refer to as Good Friday. This coming Friday, we will be here at the church. There are two services. There's one at noon, and then there was one at 7 o'clock that night. And why are we gathering on Good Friday? And why is it even called Good Friday? What's good about it? Well, what we are doing is we are gathering to commemorate, to remember, to celebrate the death of Jesus. On that day, we celebrate the day that he was crucified, okay, which in our text would be the Passover. And so that's why we're getting together. Now, why do we call it good? Well, you know, his death was not good at all. What I'm talking about is the way that it was done. The way that he was killed was obviously horrific. That's not something that we necessarily want to dwell on and go, oh man, look how good this was. It was extremely sad. What was good about it then? Why do we call it Good Friday? Because in dying, Jesus paid for our sins. So on Good Friday, we commemorate, or we remember, we celebrate the fact that he conquered sin. On Easter Sunday, we celebrate the fact that he conquered death. Why do we celebrate that? Well, because he died, he was crucified, died in the grave 3 days. On the third day, he rose from the grave. So he conquered sin and then conquered death all in one weekend. That's a pretty busy weekend. Conquering sin and conquering death. Well, what we like to do is let's back it up here again. Verse 1, then 6 days before the Passover, let's see triumphal worship here. Jesus came to Bethany. Now, Bethany is not a person. I know that that's a name nowadays, Bethany. But he comes to this place, and it says that this was where Lazarus, where Lazarus was, who had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead. So he goes to Bethany where Lazarus was. Now Lazarus, just a short time before this, had been dead, and he brought him back to life. If you've never read that story or heard that story, then you will want to go back a chapter in the book of John and read about that in chapter 11. Jesus goes to a funeral, ruins the whole thing by bringing the person back to life and stopping the funeral. And then they get to celebrate his life, and it is believed by lots of good Bible teachers that that is exactly what they're doing here in verses 1 and 2. Notice verse 2. There they made him a supper, talking about Jesus. They made Jesus a supper or dinner, and Martha served. She was the sister of Lazarus. She served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him. Lazarus, it's okay. You were just dead. Don't worry about it. We'll serve you dinner. Okay, so don't worry. You just sit down. Don't strain yourself because you were just dead a short time ago. So what they're doing is they're celebrating not only the resurrection of Lazarus, but also the fact that Jesus was the one that brought him back to life. Now, that's just a little bit funny because here's Jesus a week before he dies and then is resurrected. And what's he doing? Celebrating someone else's resurrection. Celebrating the resurrection of Lazarus. And it's done in honor of him. That's evident in verse 2. There they made him a supper. So they made this meal specifically for Jesus. And they're celebrating all of this. Okay? Now, in verse 3, we read this. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Now, in looking at triumphal worship, before we get into the triumphal entry, what we want to see here, we learn some valuable things about worship from this woman, Mary. And the first one is seen here in verse 3. In fact, well, there are other things that we learn, but the good things here are found in verse 3. And that is that her triumphal worship was costly. Costly. Now notice what it says then in verse 3. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard. Now, this was oil or perfume from a plant, a spikenard. And they would make a perfume out of it. Now, why did they do that? Well, they did that. They had perfume. And why is perfume really at the center of all of this, or at least this act of worship and service? It's there because, notice with me in verse 5. Skip down to verse 5 real quick. So Judas Iscariot asked this question about this oil that she's just poured out on the feet of Jesus. He said, why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii? Now you go, what is 300 denarii? Well, it is believed, and then he went on to say, and given to the poor, and we'll deal with Judas Iscariot in a little while. But this very costly oil of spikenard was important for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're told there that it was costly. Okay? In fact, I'll go ahead and put this up there. It was costly in this sense that it had a dollar amount attached to it, 300 denarii. Now, 300 denarii, it is believed, was the amount that, generally speaking, a worker in that day could save up in a year. A year's worth of time. So let's say that you find, you go, man, you know what? I was walking through the store the other day, and I got one of those little samples. And, man, they got the new Dolce & Gabbana, baby. And I want to get me some of that, and I'm gonna start saving up. And let's say that you save for a year, okay? Maybe you babysit or whatever it is, whatever kind of work you do, and you save up money for a year, and you go and you buy that new Dolce & Gabbana or whatever, I was gonna say Britney Spears, but some of you are probably like, who is Britney Spears? But whatever kind of perfume you get, or for the guys, the cologne, whatever it is that you buy. But you save up for a year in order to buy this. Well, that would be the equivalent of what she had. She had this very costly, and we find out it was worth 300 denarii. Again, we'll talk about Judas Iscariot a little bit. But we find out that the costliness of her worship, that it cost her a dollar amount. Now, what did she do with this? Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus. And we'll stop there for just a moment. Now, I want you to go back to that Dolce & Gabbana or whatever kind of cologne or perfume it is that you saved up for a year to get. Okay, you save up for a year, you go down, you buy that. Now, let's say you take that, you open it up, and you pour it on somebody's feet. Now, here's what happens sometimes when we read the Bible. It's funny when we read the Bible. We do lots of different things. Sometimes we just read through things like, let me just get to these 10 verses and move on. And we miss all kinds of things. And then there are times when we read something like this. We go, she came in, she anointed the feet of Jesus. I'm not really sure what that means, but I don't know what she was doing with Jesus' feet, but she's using this very costly oil. And then, so here's the other thing that we do. We'll read and we'll go, you know what, that's really weird, except I'm reading the Bible, and the Bible's really weird. And to be honest, sometimes it is. Sometimes there are some really strange things that happen. You and I want to remember that we're reading, we need to read within context. So what was, society like at that time? What were the customs? What was happening then? But I'm here to tell you that you could read the Bible. Now, if you were to go to Matthew 26, Mark chapter 14, you would read about this occurrence, okay, about what's going on here. But this is not normal. you could read the Bible and you're not going to find that this is a normal activity. Well, you know, people, they're always pouring, you know, oil on each other's feet. No, that's not normal. Now, what was very normal was for someone to come to your house and you would have a servant go and wash your guests' feet. So they would wash their feet. So they come in, kick off their sandals, you wash their feet. Now they can walk to your house with clean feet because they've been outside walking in the dirt. But putting perfume, that would be just as strange as you saving for a year to buy your bottle of perfume or cologne and then spraying it on your feet. Now, some of you guys might need to, but we don't do that. That's not normal. That's not something we normally do, especially if it's expensive and it took me a year to save up. I certainly don't want to use that on my feet. Now, let me tell you how much of a smooth criminal I am. This morning, I had to run up to my office. I was in here doing some things, and then like, oh, I gotta go check. I gotta get my church clothes on. So I go up and get my church clothes on. And you're looking at me like, those are your church clothes? But I went up to get church clothes. And then I remembered I was just about to leave my office. I was like, oh, I need some cologne. And I keep a little emergency bottle in my desk, in my drawer. So I go to grab that. Now, it's not the normal cologne that I normally use because I don't have my car, but that's another story. Who cares about all that? So I grab this cologne. Well, here's what I do. I usually will spray that just kind of in this general area. So what I did was I grabbed the cologne, I picked my head, I cocked my head back, and I went to spray. And wouldn't you know that I missed this general area. And it went all on my face. And because I had my head cocked back and I sprayed, it went on my face and straight up my nose. And then there I am in my office, like my hand, you know, I'm carrying some stuff. It's like, you know, now, since I did that, all I can smell is that cologne, man. All up in my nostrils. Now, that's strange for me because my nose, not because of COVID, because it happened a long time before that, but my nose just hasn't worked well for a lot of years, and so I don't always smell things. One time my daughter walked into the house, and she's like, hey, what are you doing? And I go, what do you mean? I'm, you know, getting my coffee, or I'm, you know, getting ready to make my oatmeal or whatever. She goes, it smells like gas in here. I had no idea. I was in there getting ready to suffocate or blow up the neighborhood or whatever. I don't know, but I couldn't smell it. I couldn't smell it. So my nose doesn't always work that well. But today, all I can smell is that cologne. I smell like Hollister, man. It smells like the Hollister store. Like, whoa, man, what is going on? Listen, she had this very costly oil of spikenard. She anoints the feet of Jesus. That's not normal. Now, when you read the other stories, you find out that she anointed the head of Jesus. And so probably what happened was in pouring it on his head, it poured down onto his feet. She probably didn't put it directly onto his feet, although she seems to be, you know, at least in our story here, John is focused on that, the fact that she anointed the feet of Jesus. So she just used this costly, in a dollar amount, it was costly. She just used that and poured it all on Jesus. But this is going to cost her much more than a dollar amount. Now, before we move on to what else it's going to cost her, let me just point something out for you and I. It is a question, really, and you might say, man, you're getting all in my business. What's the deal this morning? But what is it that you do with your the money that you have? Whose money is it? And what do you do with it? Now, I don't want you to answer out loud. I'm throwing out a question. And the question is for you. You're to take that question and then analyze yourself. You analyze your own habits and your own spending and the things that you do. But some of you, I'm talking to a group of high school students. So right now, like some of you are not working yet and you're chomping at the bit. Like you want to work so bad. Because you want to, your dad's like, I'm not spending that much money on shoes. And so now you're like, oh, I got to work, I got to save up, I got to get those new shoes. Some of you might already be working, and maybe you're, during the week you're flipping Krabby Patties or whatever you're doing, you're getting a paycheck. Some of you might not be working at, the burger place, and so maybe you babysit, or maybe you mow lawns, or you walk dogs, or you pull weeds, or whatever it is that you do, what we would call odd jobs. But either way, maybe you're making some money, and this is the time. And if you're not doing that yet, you're probably about to. You're probably like, man, how can I, become, Insta famous or a TikTok star? Because I need to make some money, man. Well, I need to get some money coming And so the question is, what is it that you do with your money? Is your money saved in order to be able to spend on yourself? That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Saving money is a good thing. But when it concerns God, how tightly do you grip it? Do you say, no, you know what, God? No, no. I realize, God, that you gave me life and you keep me breathing. And, if it wasn't for you, I would have just been dead already, but I'm not giving you nothing. So we don't want to be like that. We want to be like Mary, who freely gave. What we want to do is, when it comes to the Lord, we want to hold things loosely. In other words, if you were to come up here and try to pull this clicker out of my hand, if I were to grip it, obviously you would have a hard time pulling it out of my hand. But if I were to hold it loosely and say, hey, it's all yours, just come and take it out. The way I want to be with God, the second way, I don't want to grip my things so tightly that God, I don't want to give God anything. What I want to do, I want to hold it loosely and say, you know what, God, take whatever you want. Whatever it is that you take it, whatever it is that you desire. Well, that was Mary here. In her worship, in this act of worship, this act of service, she was holding her money, her dollar amount, this very costly perfume, she was holding it very loosely. This was in her mind and in her heart. Obviously, we see that she's got no problem surrendering that to the Lord. She gives it up freely. It's yours. So she takes it, she anoints the feet of Jesus. But then she goes a step further. If that wasn't surprising enough, it says that she wipes his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But she wiped his feet with her hair. Again, we read that, we go, oh, it's the Bible. Pigs were demon possessed and jumped into the ocean, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens. I mean, people probably wiped each other's feet with their hair all the time. No, they did not. This is going to cost her not only a dollar amount, but also her dignity. Let me explain to you why, and we'll have a hard time understanding this, but when we read it in context and understand that we're talking about a different time, different culture, women were not supposed to show their hair, let alone take their hair down, number one. So the first thing that she does in it costing her dignity, and I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but if you're taking notes, you can say she let her hair down. She let down her hair. That was a big deal. Nowadays, right now, hair for you young ladies, man, that's everything, right? Everything. You got to get it to the right length, and it's just incredible what you do to it. If you got curly hair, you want straight hair. If you got straight hair, you want curly hair. And then you go about it with, literally irons. Literally irons. These fancy irons, like burning your hair into submission. Coloring it. Spraying it. It's like, get it as flat as you can. Okay, now spray this in there to plump it back up. Wait, what is it? What are you doing? Which one is it? Well, I want it like this so I can, but isn't that how your hair looks right now? Yeah, but you don't understand. And I don't understand. I don't understand. Women were not supposed to show their hair, especially in this type of community, let alone reveal it. She let her hair down. She wiped his feet with her hair. See, in order to do that, she wasn't asking Jesus, hey, put your feet on the table. Man, I'm trying to wipe your hair. She couldn't do that. Jesus wasn't going to do that. You're not going to put somebody's feet on the table. Instead, what she does, she lets down her hair. But the second thing she did in dignity, and this costing her dignity, is in order for her to even wipe his feet with her hair, she had to lower herself. This is absolutely scandalous. It's undignified. Again, we go, well, it's the Bible. They just do weird things. No, this is not normal. And for the people, I'm thinking about Martha and Lazarus and Jesus. Everybody that's Martha, she's trying to have this wonderful dinner, in honor of Jesus and her brother being raised from the dead. It's kind of a big deal. And, she's trying to have this wonderful dinner. And then in comes Mary. And Mary, first of all, comes and she breaks open her jar of spikenard, 300 denarii worth. She pours it on Jesus. I mean, it's awkward. What are you doing? Why would you come in here with your new Dolce & Gabbana and just pour it all over some guy? We realize, and they realize too, it wasn't just some guy, it was Jesus. Still. But then once she does that, then she begins to reveal her hair. And I mean, I don't know who all was in the dinner party or at the house at that moment. We know that there were lots of people coming through, which we'll see as we continue to read in a moment. But there were other people there, and I wonder, there must have been a gasp or a hush or something that came over the group of people that were there. What is she doing? Why would she pour this out on the feet of Jesus? That's so awkward. And now she's letting down her hair, what's going on. And then, to their horror, she lowered herself. So in her dignity, she let down her hair, number one. And then secondly, she lowered herself. Again, this is absolutely scandalous. She began to rub the feet of Jesus with her hair. This is not normal. It's not normal behavior, not normal activity. And so what are we learning from this? We're talking about triumphal worship. You go, triumphal worship? What is this all about? Obviously, this woman, Mary, is not concerned with anyone else or anything else. Her worship, she's dialed in, as you ladies like to say, she's locked in. It would seem to me that in Mary's view, all she can see is Jesus. There's no Martha, there's no Lazarus, there's no anybody else in there. She's only concerned with Jesus. And I ask myself, does my worship look anything like this? Does it cost me anything? Or is my worship so dead that, there's none of this life in there? Now, not that I want to come in and start rubbing your feet with my hair and my cologne, but when it comes to Jesus, does my worship resemble this at all? She apparently is unaware of anyone else in that house, in that room. She's only concerned with Jesus and worshiping Jesus. And because of that, at the end of verse 3, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. And again, there were other people that were coming to the house visiting. So do you understand? Every single person that came to that house that day, and maybe for days, smelled like Mary's worship. Every time somebody came in, man, is that oil of spikenard? Boy, that's a strong scent. Imagine Martha going, yeah. What's that from? Did you break your jar of perfume? No. Mary opened it up. She anointed the feet of Jesus. With how much? All of it. 300 denarii. 300 denarii, all of it. And that's not the craziest part. She took her hair down? Yes. What? She wiped the feet of Jesus. She did what? Yeah. She bowed down to Jesus, wiped his feet with her hair after spending all of the costliest thing that she had, spent it all on Jesus. And then I asked myself, and I hope that you will ask yourself, what does my worship like in comparison with that? Am I anywhere near that? This woman's worship was triumphal because, for lots of different reasons here, but mainly because there was no performance here. It was an act of worship to Jesus. And for you and I, our worship of Jesus is never going to be this as long as you and I are concerned with who's next to me on this side and that side and in front of me and in back of me. As long as I come in here for worship and I'm aware of other people in here, my worship's never going to be like this. It's never going to be like this. She was not in this moment, don't get me wrong, she was concerned. Obviously, she loved other people, but in that moment, she was only concerned with Jesus. And when you and I, if I come in here and I'm sitting next to David and we're worshiping together, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, you know what, I don't sing so well, and so you know what, I want to sing good so that I don't offend or chase off David, or I don't want him to laugh at me or whatever. Then my worship is never really going to be worship. At that point, my worship is only a worship of David in a sense, because I'm doing it for him. What I want to do is I want to get to the point in my life where I come in and I just worship no matter what, no matter who, no matter when. And whether I'm sitting in church on a Sunday or Wednesday, or if I'm in the middle of Joshua Tree National Park, or if I'm in the shower. Isn't the shower so cool to sing in? The acoustics in there, man. Right? I start worshiping God, man. I sound like The Weeknd in there. Like, oh, man, I sound pretty good. Maybe I should ask Matt if I could join the worship team. But then you know what? Then you keep singing, you get out of the shower, and you're like, hey, nah, forget it. Nah, forget it. Yeah. Wherever I'm at, I want my worship to be like this. If it costs me something, monetary, great. I want to be able to give it. You're starting to make money now, you all. And if not, you will be very soon. What about that money? Do you see it as the Lord's? It's God's. Spend it on God. Spend it on yourself. It's okay. But are you willing at least to say, you know what, here, I'll hold it loosely, God. You take whatever you want. You gave it to me. You gave me the ability to go flip Krabby Patties, so you take it if you want it. I want to hold it loosely. If it costs me something, it costs me something. So what? But even if it costs me my dignity, the whispers of other people, the snickering of other people, so what? What I want to do is get to a place where I'm only concerned with glorifying God, and that was Mary here. That was Mary. Incredible. Now, not only was her worship costly, but anytime that your worship is costly, especially to that degree, your worship is also going to be controversial. It's also going to be controversial. Look at verses 4 through 6. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' own disciples, right, been with Jesus, been literally living with Jesus, watching Jesus perform miracles, cast out demons, heal people, bring back Lazarus from the dead, been watching all of these things. And then it says this in verse 4, but one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, oy vey, who would betray him. So, this is 6 days before the Passover. So within 6 days, this guy, Judas Iscariot, was going to betray Jesus, sell Jesus. What does he do? Verse 5. He said, why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? Why didn't we sell it instead? You know what he's saying? He's saying, why did you waste that on the feet of Jesus? Why would you waste that on Jesus? You should have used that to make some money, man. You should have used that to trade in to make some money. It's controversial. People will say the same thing to you. It's like, oh, you're so young. Why are you wasting your time at church? It's Sunday. Come on, man. You should be out. Let's go to Magic Mountain. Let's go have some fun. You go. We're out Saturday night. You want to leave early because you got to go to church tomorrow? Come on. You're wasting your life. You're wasting your youth. Stay out late with us. Let's party. Let's go. It's controversial. People will give you a hard time for it. They did here. It's controversial. So if you're worshiping God and it's affecting other people, it's going to be controversial. Somebody's not going to like it. Why didn't you give it to the poor? But notice this in verse 6. This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because we're talking about Judas here, he was a thief and had the money box, and he used to take what was put in it. Dude's like the mafia. Every time there's money coming in the box, he's like skimming some off the top a little bit. Let's just get a little bit of that. So he's like, he sees her pouring this. In his mind, she's wasting it on Jesus. And he's thinking, man, that was 300 denarii. We could have sold it, put it in the box to use it for the poor. And I'm really poor, he's thinking. And I could have taken some of that. So he's got the wrong idea. Now we're going to find out here in just a moment that this disciple of Jesus he's just way out in left field. He's got the completely wrong idea, and that this woman has done something wonderful. But understand here that her worship, this kind of worship, was controversial, and people are going to give you a hard time. It might even happen in here. Hopefully it doesn't. I want you all to have freedom in here when you come in here on Sundays or Wednesdays to worship. Raise your voice to the Lord. Clap your hands. Raise your hands if you want. Do that little, we just do the little Calvary Chapel Holy Ghost dance. We don't really dance around the room, but we kind of sway back and forth a little bit. Get the clap on or whatever. We don't get too wild, too Pentecostal. But worship God. I want you to have the freedom. But even in here, somebody might go, oh my gosh, did you see the way? Or did you hear her? You know what? So what? If all I'm focused on is Jesus, then I'm not going to hear the haters. Right? I've got my eyes on the Lord. I can't see you being all negative. I'm worshiping God. I'm listening to the Lord. I'm singing. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Hopefully it's not that way in here, but it was for her. Her worship was costly, it was controversial, but it was also commendable. I love this one, verses 7 and 8. But Jesus said, now Judas Iscariot just finished saying, oh, why did you waste that on Jesus? You should have sold it and put it in my money box. So Jesus answers him in verse 7, but Jesus said, let her alone. That means leave her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. Key verse. Key verse. Evidently, Mary understood what she was doing. Evidently, Mary understood the assignment. She understood that Jesus was on his way to die, and Jesus says, she's anointing me for that death. Now, in those days, when someone died, they would, as they were wrapping them, they would wrap them with different oils and ointments in order to keep the smell of a dead, rotting body from a corpse, from traveling too far. They would try to suppress that with the different ointments and perfumes and different things. And he says, look, she's done this for the day of my burial. So she understood the assignment. She understood. Maybe she didn't understand everything that Jesus was headed for, but she understood there's something about this guy, and he's getting ready to die, and I want to prepare for that. And so he commends her. He says in verse 8, he says, the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always. What is Jesus saying there? Is Jesus saying, forget the poor? You got me. No. What he's saying is the poor, that you're always going to have an opportunity to care for and bless the poor. And you should do that. He says, but me you do not have always. And they didn't understand sitting there. The disciples didn't understand that within a week he was going to be dead. He's going to resurrect again, yes, but he was going to die. You're not going to have him with you always. And, people, when they're busting your chops about, dedicating your young life to the Lord, give a hard time, like, oh, but you're so young, like, why are you wasting your time sitting in church? Go out and live it up, go out and party. You can do that religious stuff when you get old. No. This is as far as my health is concerned, these are the best years of my life. Why would I not want to give my best to the Lord? That makes total sense. To take the best that I have and waste it on sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The world's been doing that ever since. Why would I do that? That's ridiculous. Why would I take the very best that I have and waste it on those things? Why not invest it spiritually? Why not give it to the Lord? And so she's commended here. Now, he doesn't say to Mary, hey, you did a great thing, but he does do that in the way that he's answering Judas Iscariot. The poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always. Look, you've only got this time in your life right now. Nobody's guaranteed tomorrow, right? We don't know if we're going to make it through the rest of the day. So whatever you have right now, the best of what you've got, give it to the Lord. It's the best thing that we can do with our lives. Give it to God. Let him do with it whatever he likes. The poor you have with you always. There's always opportunities to bless other people. But when it comes to the time that I give to the Lord, I want to dedicate that to the Lord. If I'm coming here on a Sunday and a Wednesday and it's for the Lord, or at least that's what I tell people, if I come here and it's for the Lord, then I ought to give that to the Lord and not give it to other people. There's always opportunities to give to other people. But when I have an opportunity to join and worship, or again, even if it's at home, in my bedroom, or in the car, or my headphones while I'm riding my scooter, or whatever it is that you're doing, you've got an opportunity to worship. Take that opportunity to worship. Give it all to God. Don't go, you know what, I'm gonna worship God, but only give him half. You know what? It'd be better to go a shorter time and just give all of that time to the Lord than to just give him half of your heart. You've got this now. And even this right here, what we're doing, you and I, right here, what we're doing, this could be taken away from us. Can't it? It was only 5 years ago. So only 5 years ago in 2020 that Matt and I were coming in here Sundays and Wednesdays by ourselves because nobody was allowed to come to church. Remember that? You remember that? You were young. It was 5 years ago. I get it, but you remember that. Maybe back then it was not that big a deal. Oh, I could stay home, I hang out, not a big deal. But this was taken away from us. And there are people who would like to take that away from us permanently. And so while you have it, use it. Give it to the Lord. There's always opportunities to do other things, but only so many opportunities to sit in his presence or to worship him. And so we want to do that. Give it all to him. Now, it says in verse 9, now a great many of the Jews knew that he was there. There was a bunch of Jews that knew that Jesus was there. And they came, not only for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. Now we'll get to Lazarus in just a moment, but a great many of the Jews came. Think back with me real quickly. The whole house smells like Mary's worship. Now, a great many of the Jews are coming to see Jesus and to see Lazarus, and in the process, they're smelling Mary's worship. Her worship went far beyond Jesus, went far beyond the reaches of Jesus. Her worship is now affecting an entire group of people. Again, I ask myself, what does my worship do? I don't want to be here to worship just so that I can affect other people, but is my worship, the way that I worship God, is it affecting anybody at all? Is it even reaching Jesus, or am I only worshiping David because he sits over here and I don't want to sing the wrong way, so I better perform for him? Like if I'm locked in on Jesus and worshiping Jesus alone, then my worship is going to affect everybody around me. And that's not a bad thing. I want people's hearts to be stirred up and go, man, you know what? I'm not there yet. I'm not saying I'm there, but it wouldn't be a bad thing if someone said, oh man, I want to worship like that guy. I want to worship like that girl. I want to worship like David, or I want to worship like Bella, or I want to worship like Christina, or whoever. I want, that's not a bad thing. People go, oh man, I want to worship like Chris, man. He just, I don't even think he knows we're in the room, but I'm not there yet. But everybody that came through in verse 9, all the great many Jews, they smell, what is that? Where's Lazarus? Where's Jesus? Oh man, what's that smell? Oh, that was Mary. She was here worshiping. You can smell it everywhere that we go. And no doubt Jesus, probably for many days, several days, smelled like the worship of Mary. Mary smelled like the worship because she used her hair to wipe his feet. But this is funny in verse 9. Now, a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came, not only for Jesus' sake only, they wanted to see Jesus, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. Hey, did you hear that Lazarus was dead? Yeah, let's go look at him. I mean, that's not strange at all, right? We would want to do the same thing. We get all hyped up if we're driving on the freeway and somebody's on the side of the freeway with a flat tire. Like, wow, man, slow down. Wait a minute, slow down. We'll back traffic up for like 2 miles. And then here comes Pastor Chris driving. I'm like, man, what is all this? What's going on? There's traffic for 2 miles. Then you finally get there and like, wow, there's a guy changing his tire. Okay. So we're just going to slow down on the freeway to watch a guy change his tire. Okay, that's so exciting to us. So there's no mystery here. They were like, oh, this guy was dead. Let's go see him. And then I picture like Lazarus, when Jesus, if you go back to John chapter 11 and read the story, Lazarus came out and he was still wrapped in his grave clothes, Bela Lugosi or whatever. He's like coming out like, and he's told him, take off the grave clothes. But you can imagine people like, oh man, let's go see. I wonder if does he still look like a mummy, or is it World War Z zombie? Like, where's Brad Pitt? Like, I don't know. Let's go look. What is he doing? He's back from the dead. Let's go ask him, what it was like, or what he saw, or whatever. They wanted to come and see him. He had been raised from the dead. I get it. And then look at this crazy verse in verse 10. This is one of those verses that I mentioned at the beginning of our study time. Sometimes we'll read the Bible and we'll just fly through. Look at verse 10. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death. We go, yeah, so what? No. Wait. Somebody is plotting to put Lazarus. Somebody put a hit on Lazarus. And you go, who is it? What do they say, Josh?
If you fail, try again.
He was dead once. Why didn't he just stay dead, right? Like, But the chief priests. That would be like hearing, the pastors at Revival put a hit out on somebody. They want to kill him. That's crazy. They're religious leaders. Crazy. And let me ask you a question. Why do they want to kill Lazarus? This poor cat. What did he do? All he did was get sick and die. He didn't ask Jesus to bring him back to life. He was dead. Martha and Mary were calling Jesus, come, you got to come and see our brother. He's dying. He's dying. Jesus purposely showed up late. He gets there, Lazarus is dead, and then he calls him, Lazarus, come forth. Come out of the grave. Lazarus, here he comes out of the grave. Lazarus didn't do nothing, man, and now they're putting hits out on it, and it's the religious leaders. Lazarus is literally going to get killed for dying. He died, was brought back to life by Jesus. What is going on? This is craziness. But it's the hatred is fueling the chief priests, the religious leaders, who obviously were not religious at all. It was a show. They were fake, phony. But it does bring up an important point. Jesus said this. Jesus said it. They didn't say it about him. He said it. In Matthew 10:34. He said, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. We go, what? Jesus didn't come to earth as some kind of political peace convoy, like, we just want to spread peace throughout all the earth. Now, Jesus wanted to do that. God would have loved to have done that, but God's a realist. He understands that the whole world is not going to experience peace. Why? Because the whole world is not going to bow to God. So that wasn't Jesus' main point in coming. Now, he did come to bring peace in a sense. He wanted there to be peace between God and man. But he understood that not everybody was going to submit to that. So he says, I didn't come to bring peace on earth. I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. We go, what, a sword? Yeah. He goes on to explain there in Matthew chapter 10 that he says, I actually came to divide people. We go, wait a minute, I don't understand. No, what he was saying was, it wasn't Jesus going out and going, you know what, I don't like you guys, I'm gonna break you guys up, and I want to, let's break off these relationships. No, what he's saying is, he's pointing out is that people are going to end up hating one another because of their commitment to Jesus or their lack of commitment to Jesus. And here we have Lazarus loves Jesus. He's got a problem. The religious leaders hate Jesus. And so in that sense, there was a sword by Jesus because of Jesus. Now, Jesus didn't want to do that purposely. That wasn't his desire. But it happened because Lazarus submitted to Jesus. The chief priests did not. Verse 11, it says, because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus. So the chief priests were actually upset. They were jealous. Everybody's believing in Jesus. And, we got to kill Lazarus. Isn't that crazy? That a religious leader would say, oh, we can't have all these people believing in Jesus. We got to get rid of this Lazarus guy. He died. He came back to life. That's so inconvenient. Get rid of him. Now, we finished by looking at the triumphal entry, and it's only a few verses here, verses 12 to 19. And here's where we get, this is Palm Sunday. The next day, a great multitude that had come to the feast. This is the next day. So if what we just read was 6 days before the Passover, this would be, 5 days before the Passover. The next day, a great multitude that had come to the feast, when they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, verse 13, took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him and cried out, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel. Now, I am going to call this, and I'll explain to you why, I'm going to call this a false hope. Now, it says here in verse 13 that they took branches of palm trees. No doubt they were waving those things and singing, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel, referring to Jesus. They probably threw the palm branches on the ground so that Jesus, as he's walking in or he's on a donkey coming in, he could ride over those things. Palm branches were a symbol of victory. And you go, why palm branches? Good question. Why is a laurel wreath a sign of a victory? Right? The Greek games, the Olympic games, it's what they chose. The palm trees being a sign of victory goes back to the time of the Maccabees. If you've never read about the Maccabees, you need to do that. Jewish revolt, incredible story. There's this miraculous event that takes place with oil, and it's pretty neat. But they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him and cried out, Hosanna, blessed is he. That's save now. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel. So they're referring to him as the King of Israel. Where did they get this from? Psalm 118, verses 25 and 26. They've read this before. The reason I called it false hope is because they're looking at Jesus like he's a political conqueror. Here he comes. He's going to, the Romans were occupying at the time. We're going to get rid of Rome finally. Jesus is going to, be victorious. He's going to lead us into victory. Here we go. It was a false hope. They were hoping in Jesus that he would be a political leader. That's not what he came for. He came to restore the relationship between God and mankind. It moves from a false hope to fulfilled prophecy in verses 14 to 16, where it says, Then Jesus, when he had found a young donkey, sat on it, as it is written, Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. So he's fulfilling prophecy. You go, what are you talking about? Well, a long time before Jesus was ever even born, in the book of Zechariah 9:9, chapter 9, verse 9, listen to what it says there. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Bless you. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey. So he fulfilled prophecy in doing this, sitting on this young donkey and riding it into Jerusalem. In verse 16, his disciples did not understand these things at first. Remember verse 7 and Mary? What did Jesus say? Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. Mary understood the assignment. His own disciples were still clueless. It's 5 days before he's going to die, and they still did not understand. And then look what it says in verse 16. His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things were written about him and that he had done these things to him. I'm laughing because he was glorified? Yeah, glorified, that's after being crucified. So Jesus goes they've been with him for 3.5 years. They go another week. He dies. 3 days later, he resurrects. He ends up hanging out for a while, for about 40 days. He ascends to the right hand of the Father. And then they went, oh, that's what he was talking about. Mary, she was locked in, dialed in. She knew he's going to go die. Like, you guys don't get it. His own disciples were like, what? Why is he dying? Why is the tomb empty? What's going on? It wasn't until after they went, oh, is that what he was talking about? Slow. Verse 17. Therefore the people who were with him, when he called Lazarus out of his tomb and raised him from the dead, they bore witness. They no, I was there. I saw it. He called Lazarus. Lazarus came out. For this reason, the people also met him in verse 18, because they heard that he had done this sign. Man, let's go see what he's doing. But there's one last thing here that this triumphal entry does. It gave the people a false hope. Now, that was not Jesus. That's not on Jesus. That's the people. They didn't fully understand who Jesus was. That he was the Messiah. They were reading a messianic psalm, Psalm 118, but they were thinking that, oh, he's going to come and overthrow the political rulers. That's not what he came to do. So on their part, they had a false hope. But he fulfilled prophecy. And then lastly, the triumphal entry frustrated a certain group. In verse 19, the Pharisees therefore said among themselves, you see that you are accomplishing nothing. Look, the world has gone after him. Everybody's following him. The Pharisees were more of the religious leaders. You had the chief priests, then you had the Pharisees. You also had Sadducees, but it mentions the two religious groups here, the chief priests and the Pharisees. And it was the religious leaders who were rejecting Jesus, everything that Jesus did. How sad when the religious leaders go, you know what, that Jesus. I watched a video this past week of a female pastor at a church, and she was explaining to the congregation all of the mistakes that Jesus had made. Literally talking to her church on a Sunday, telling them, oh, you know what, Jesus made a mistake when he said this. Jesus made a mistake when he did that. Sometimes it's the religious leaders that are against Jesus. Crazy thought. What a crazy thought. We don't ever want to be there. We want to be like Mary. Right? We want to be worshipers. We want to be free to worship. We want to be focused on Jesus. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much.